Hello and welcome. I'm Elena Elder Correa, and I'm the Culinary Medicine Program Coordinator and Chef Instructor for Corewell Health in Southwest Michigan. Today's webinar focuses on the topic of food as medicine for healthy aging and cancer prevention. We are honored to welcome Dr. Dawn Mussallem to present today on this topic. Dr. Mussallem is a distinguished consultant in the Division of Hematology and Oncology at Mayo Clinic and an assistant professor of medicine. A double board certified lifestyle medicine specialist at the Robert and Monica Jacoby Center for Breast Health, she advances evidence-based holistic breast cancer care that integrates nutrition, movement, mind-body practices, and conventional therapies. With more than 25 years of patient-centered clinical wellness, Dr. Mussallem is internationally recognized in cancer prevention and survivorship, lifestyle and integrative medicine, women's health, and longevity-focused performance. Her own health journey, from a stage 4 cancer diagnosis 3 months into medical school to a life-restoring heart transplant in 2021, infuses her work with uncommon empathy, resilience, and urgency. A sought-after keynote and motivational speaker, from White House Correspondents' Week events to the Super Bowl, Wimbledon, and the U.S. Open, Dr. Mussallem has brought her message to some of the world's most prominent stages. She appears on major podcasts, including the Mel Robbins podcast, webinars, radio, and television. Her mission is this: elevate human flourishing by guiding patients, communities, and institutions to heal through science-driven lifestyle change, compassionate care, and the wisdom of lived experience. Dr. Mussallem, we are so glad to have you join us today for the Plant Powered Challenge. And with that, I'd love for you to share with us on the topic of longevity.
Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you, Corewell, for having me here. It's always so exciting. I cherish and love and adore that one-on-one time with my patients, but I love being with a big group to help inspire you towards your own wellness journey. So let's get started. I'm going to do the hardest part now, and that's going to be I'm going to share my screen. So let's make sure I get it right. I think that we have it right here. That should be good. You guys should see everything nice. So thanks so much, Elena, for introducing my topic. We're going to talk about flourishing with food, your daily choices, and how that can help to contribute to your own flourishing and really keep you on earth for as long as possible, but feeling good during that time. Here are my objectives. I don't know that we really need to spend time on this, but I'm going to kind of set forth the standard of our discussion based on blue zones and the power of 9. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what a suboptimal diet looks like and how we can transition to more of a healthy diet. And I'm going to use a case example of one of my own personal patients that I follow who has done a remarkable job onboarding with a whole food plant-based diet. Super exciting. And then we'll examine a little bit of that debate about animal protein versus plant protein, because I know that's something that when you're on social media, you're hearing all these mixed messages, and I'm here to try to set that straight for you. So, when it comes to aging, it's something we all have in common, right? And it's something that's actually on the trajectory, as we know, because of the baby boomer age. But this is what is so incredibly concerning. And as a physician, it's so important that we back everything we say in evidence and also fact check the things we hear, even when they're in evidence, to say, hey, is this really accurate? It sounds like an exaggeration. So I hear this statistic come across a very respected journal that was being presented to me. And I thought, there is no way this is accurate. That is too extreme. And what I heard was that 95% of adults over the age of 60, that's right, 95% of adults over the age of 60 have one chronic disease. And I didn't believe it. So I looked it up, and guess what? That is a fact today. And over 80% have 2 chronic diseases. We know that all adults in America, at least 60% have one chronic disease, 18 and over. And we know among kids, our children, about 40% of our kids have a chronic disease. And this is all driven by lifestyle. And you can see this image here. These are some of the numbers we see in individuals over 65 who are experiencing these health conditions that take away from feeling good as we age. And a lot of people would say, well, it's genetic. Well, guess what? What we've learned is that only 15 to 25% of aging is actually due to our genes. The rest is totally modifiable. It's within our own ability to change. And I think there's no better example than to talk about blue zones when it comes to healthy aging. So for those of you that don't know what blue zones are, it was founded by Dan Buettner. He teamed up with National Geographic, and basically they became the world's leading longevity researchers. They noticed that there were these areas around the world where people lived to be 100 years old. They flourished with very low levels of chronic disease. And they call these areas the blue zones. And it's kind of cute, actually, why they called it the blue zones. And it's because when they found these areas on their expeditions, they would use a blue Sharpie on the map to circle these areas. Okay, so these are the areas: Loma Linda, California, right here in the United States; Nicoya, Costa Rica; Sardinia, Italy; Icaria, Greece; and Okinawa, Japan. This here is the foundation by which the blue zones was set forth on. And you can see they're organized in that inner circle by 4 core fundamental qualities. The first is connect. They connect with a big community. They have this sense of belonging and love, and they're kind of in the right tribe. The next is they move. They move naturally. It's not that they're going to their closest LA Fitness, but they regularly move. Next, they have a really healthy outlook psychologically. They live a life of deep meaning and purpose. And at the end of the day, they always what they call downshift. They take a break at the end of the day to be with their loved ones. And the last portion of that area of focus within the qualities of the blue zones is, guess what? It's the food is medicine. It's the eat wisely. So they have this plant slant, or this whole food, plant predominant eating pattern, and they have this 80% rule where they stop eating once they're 80% full. I want to just point out the Okinawa blue zones because I am a women's health specialist, and so it's pretty cool because in Okinawa, it's the world's highest concentration of female centenarians. And their diet is about 98% whole food plant-based. It's really composed of tofu and melons, and my favorite food in the world, purple sweet potatoes. They form these social groups, they call them moais, and they're committed to just protecting each other from any element of loneliness and making sure that everyone in the community has this beautiful sense of belonging. They have a deep sense of purpose, and this also protects them from any stressors that they experience. And the women in these societies are actually regarded as these spiritual leaders. They're actually put kind of on a pedestal. So this is one of my favorite photos of all time. At the American College of Lifestyle Medicine last year, Dan Buettner was doing a presentation, and what he shared is that this woman was sitting with her great, great, great granddaughter on her lap. Her name is Kamada-san. She's one of the spiritual leaders in the village in Okinawa. And they asked her, how does it feel? And how she responded, this gives me goosebumps. It feels like leaping into heaven. And I think this is truly the embodiment of what we want, right? Healthy aging is to age to the point that when we're older, we can enjoy the bliss of life. And here's just another little snapshot of what that Okinawa diet looks like. Again, they really emphasize those root vegetables, lots of color with green and yellow vegetables also. They lean in on those soybean-based foods, tofu, edamame. They like the seaweeds and algae. They get teas with a lot of polyphenols as their beverage. And they use some various medicinal plants like bitter melon. They really enrich their diet with lots of different spices. And we know spices and variety can be a very healthy, not just medicinal thing, but also really good for the gut microbiome. And we'll talk about that as our talk goes on. The real interesting thing in the Okinawa diet is they do get a little bit of animal protein, but it's minuscule. It's more just for little flavors or special occasions. Less than 1% of the diet comes from fish, less than 1% meat, less than 1% egg and dairy. And the one feature, again, is they stop eating when they're 80% full. I don't think I could give a talk without giving a picture of my favorite food. These are these purple sweet potatoes, and there in Japan is how it came to be that these sweet potatoes kind of got brought to our awareness. But what's really cool is these purple sweet potatoes have 150% more anthocyanins. Those are the powerful antioxidants that we find in berries that we know are so good for us. And these purple sweet potatoes have even more. They're really rich in vitamin A and vitamin C and other fine vitamins and minerals. So that's Okinawa, but what about the United States? And the Journal of the American Medical Association reported in 2022 that our diet in the United States is the leading cause of death in America. This is what contributes to heart disease, to cancers, to stroke, to diabetes. And so we know we have to start focusing on food. And I think there's no better way to do that than to share a patient example. So this was a patient of mine. I first saw her 2 years ago. Her name's Rachel. She came in to see me at Mayo Clinic for breast cancer risk assessment and how could she reduce her risk of breast cancer, because her sister was just diagnosed and she was really scared. I see this all too often though. So she comes in, she's very worried about breast cancer. But what I found to be so interesting was she really was not too concerned about all these other chronic diseases she was struggling with. She was obese. She had gained 60 pounds since she was 30 years old. A lot of this is going to sound common, right? This is things that a lot of her family members or we ourselves are struggling with. She's a type 2 diabetic. Her hemoglobin A1C is 6.7 on 2 medications. She has high cholesterol, both her LDL and triglycerides, lowering medication called a statin for that. She has high inflammation. We check her CRP. She has fatty liver disease, high blood pressure that she needs 2 medications for. She has sleep apnea and she regularly uses her CPAP. But the thing that bothered me most was that Rachel said, Dawn, my mood is down. And I started a medication a few months ago, and that medication is helping my hot flashes too. She's taking a medication called venlafaxine. Anytime I see a patient, I have them do a 24-hour food log. And they fill out that food log right when they schedule the appointment. So sometimes they schedule the appointment, there's a few month gap, right? So this is the food log she provided. And you can see it's loaded with ultra processed food and just fast foods and sugars and preservatives and not a healthy diet. Very few vegetables and fruits on here and essentially no fiber. But this was cute. So after she found out she had the appointment with me, she looked me up and she heard that I love whole food plant-based nutrition, but she thought that meant vegan. So she said, Dr. Dawn, I'm terrified of getting breast cancer. Watching my sister, what she's going through is so hard. And after I scheduled my appointment with you, I went vegan. And this is what she described. A vegan diet. But what's wrong with this? It's very processed, right? So I thought an appropriate study to share with her was this one. So this study, though it's specific to breast cancer, it kind of illuminates the fact that we want to be careful that we're vegan. We really want to focus more on whole food. That's the most important thing I want you to take home from today's conversation. And what this study did is 65,000 French women followed for 20 years. And they looked at a plant-based diet. And they compared those individuals on a healthy plant-based diet compared to an unhealthy plant-based diet. And those on the healthy plant-based diet had a 14% lower risk of breast cancer. And those on the unhealthy plant-based diet had a 20% increased risk of breast cancer. And when it comes to those unhealthy processed foods, whether they're plant-based or animal-based, they're just not healthy. But this is the problem, is 60% of the adult American diet comes from ultra-processed foods. 67% of our kids' diet is ultra-processed foods. We have more than 26,000 unique chemicals in the American diet. And if we're to go in a grocery store, 73% of all food made today is ultra-processed. And this is what it looks like, right? How do we know what foods are ultra-processed? This is what I share with my patients. You look at that label. If there's ingredients on that label that you couldn't otherwise bring in your home to make the food yourself, we should leave it at the grocery store. Okay? I highlighted a few of these ingredients for you. Really concerning. Another thing is ingredients shouldn't be this long on any label, right? Too many ingredients there. So we would leave this product on the shelf. We would not want to bring this home. So let's talk a little bit more about ultra-processed foods. This was an interesting study done out of the UK, and they looked at the total weight of ultra-processed foods that the individuals were consuming. And what they found is that every 10 percentage point increase in ultra-processed food above this baseline resulted in individuals actually dying from cancer. A 16 increased risk of dying from breast cancer, and a 30% increased risk of dying from ovary cancer. But we found that any ultra-processed food consumption did have this link of an increased risk of cancer. So, of course, being a cancer specialist, this is concerning. And so we asked ourselves, why? Well, one reason why is when you're eating this fake food, you're weeding out the ability to get the healthy food. The next reason why is this food is really destructive for the gut microbiome. Those are all those organisms in our GI tract that help to sustain our immune system, help to sustain our overall vitality. And the last is these chemicals themselves in the ultra-processed food we're now learning are harmful in and of themselves. That really shouldn't be a surprise, but the research is showing us just that. This is another really important study. This study was published in 2024. It was 92,000 individuals, again, from that French cohort. They followed them for almost 7 years. And what they found is that there was an increased risk of certain cancers, in particular with mono and diglycerides. When I shared that label a few slides back, mono and diglycerides were in that ingredient list. And what they found is that those individuals that had the most mono and diglycerides compared to those that had the least over that near 7-year period, those with the most had an increased risk of cancer by about 15%, 24% increased risk in breast cancer, and a 46% increased risk of prostate cancer. Carrageenan is another filler that was linked to a 32% increased risk of breast cancer. I want to just give you a snapshot of when it comes to mono and diglycerides, how commonly we find this in foods, including some of the favorite vegan foods folks go and buy in their effort to be healthy. So we want to try to make the foods at home and more whole food in nature. And it's not just cancer. We find that these ultra-processed foods are also linked to chronic diseases, all those diseases that Rachel had, right? So we find those ultra-processed foods have been linked to diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, and obesity. And this is a very large study, so important. So often you're on social media, you hear these claims, they talk about a study. The question we want to ask ourselves is, first of all, was this study even done in humans? Number one. And if it was done in humans, how many humans? This particular study was a review of the data, and it was included over 4 million person years. Massive study to give us this information. It doesn't take a lot of intelligence to really know that ultra-processed food would be bad. It's almost common sense, right? I sometimes joke, I kind of say, you probably don't even need to listen to me today. You could probably just think back, what did my great-grandmother eat, right? That's how we want to eat. We want to go back to the basics. So my number one take home for you today is this. Avoid ultra-processed foods, including added sugar. And I like to be a little silly with this, but if your grandma wouldn't recognize it, your body won't either. Here's a few quick take homes. You want to choose that short ingredient list. Okay, be real careful with breads and tortillas. That's one of the areas I always see those mono and diglycerides. When you get nut butters, make sure you look at your peanut butter label. Make sure they're not adding extra oil in there or other bad ingredients. When it comes to dairy-free plant milks and creamers, oh boy, you got to look at the ingredient list. Listen, I'm here to tell you, eating plant-based food doesn't need to be more expensive, but it's going to take you more time. And this is us showing up for ourselves because we love ourselves and we want to feel better. Okay? When it comes to sweets, one of the best sweets you can get is just some dark chocolate. When it comes to pastries and different candy, a lot of times those different coatings are going to be things that get us into trouble. And when possible, cook from scratch rather than buying things in a package. Now let's talk about some dietary patterns. And this is truly one of my top 3 favorite studies of all time. And this was published last year. It's kind of hot off the press. What this study asked was, what is the dietary pattern for healthy aging, right? And I bet you guys could already answer this question. But before we go to the answer, we want to ask how many people were in this study? Over 100,000 individuals, 66% women, the rest were men. There was almost 3 million person years in this study, and they followed these individuals over 30 years. And what they found out is the dietary components that were linked to healthy aging are exactly what you would have said. It's the vegetables and fruits and whole grains, the unsaturated fats, nuts and beans, and low-fat dairy. What they also concluded is that ultra-processed food was linked to a 32% less likely healthy aging. And so they found that when individuals got rid of the ultra processed food and they ate those things in the green, they avoided those things in the red. They got rid of those fake foods, sodium, sugar, red meat, processed meat, that the healthy aging was more likely 86% of the time. That is a powerful study to see that large of a number, okay? So let's go back to Rachel, because her question to me was, Dr. Dawn, how can I lower my risk of breast cancer? Here's an awesome study. This is super easy. This was out of the Women's Health Initiative, almost 50,000 women, and they followed them with an intervention that they said, we want to take your standard American diet that's high fat to a lower fat diet of 20% fat. So they lowered the fat from 32% to 20%, okay? Not that difficult. And they basically just said, we want you to eat more vegetables and fruit and whole grain. They followed these individuals for 19.6 years. And what they found at that 19, almost 20-year follow-up is that there was a reduced risk of these women dying from breast cancer by 21%. And that is really powerful because in my clinic, as a physician who works with women both with breast cancer and high risks of breast cancer, there's nothing we can do medically for breast cancer prevention when it comes to a pill that will keep those women on earth longer. Okay, it could reduce the risk of breast cancer with some of the pills we use, but it doesn't reduce the risk of dying from breast cancer. And what this study shows us is that, wow, eating more vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and slashing the fat a little bit can keep these women on earth longer and also reduce the risk of a more aggressive form of breast cancer. And it went beyond just breast cancer. They also showed that it reduced the risk of dying from any cause by 15%. So really powerful study because it was a really easy thing to do. They weren't asking for a dramatic change. So I think that's very inspiring. And of course, Rachel said, well, what about my sister? I'm on all these Facebook groups and people keep saying, do the keto diet. And she said, I also see a lot about the carnivore diet. It's just so confusing. Should I focus more on plant-based like you're saying? But there's a lot of other people saying something totally different, right? And you may be feeling that same way yourself. So I went to Open Evidence and I asked the question for you. Open Evidence is the database myself as a physician, doctors at Harvard, and top medical centers across the country have access to do these sorts of questions and research. So I put in provide long-term studies showing carnivore diet benefit. And this was the result. There are no long-term studies in medical literature that demonstrate the benefits of a carnivore diet as a distinct dietary pattern. So there we go. We can go to the next slide. There's no long-term benefit. We're never looking for a short fix. We're looking to optimize your life throughout your life cycle. The next thing was, what about a keto diet, right? So the keto diet, what it told me was there is limited evidence from long-term human studies demonstrating an overall survival benefit of a ketogenic diet. And so bottom line, carnivore and keto, we really don't know long-term safety of either of those. But what we hear is, man, people feel better when they do a carnivore diet and a keto diet. They feel better. Why is that? And we call this the feel better effect. And you know why? It's because they're getting rid of the ultra processed foods. It's not from the extreme restriction. So I think that's a really fun take home point. And it's one that can make you the fun person at the next party you're at, maybe when this conversation comes up, because all too often it seems like this is the center of conversation anywhere you go, especially if there's a doctor in the room. It's going to become part of the conversation. So here we go. This is what I get excited about. You ready? So provide long-term studies showing plant-based diet benefit. Incredible. Plant-based diets are associated with an overall survival benefit. In fact, there was a 10 to 20% reduction in dying from any cause in multiple studies and meta-analyses. The other cool thing is this just wasn't about one population. It was a diverse population of individuals, including individuals that were Black, from low-income Americans, as well as US veterans and European cohorts. So that's cool. And the quality of the study matters. And what we found out is that survival benefit was strongest when the plant-based diets were rich in these minimally processed foods. nutrient-dense foods, not just from animal products that were low. And what that means is the vegan diet, if it's poor quality, it doesn't show to have this benefit as much as a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet. And again, we see that this is the path to healthy aging. Dr. Irvi Shaw and Neil Inger have done some really powerful work in terms of doing the reviews for cancer patients. And they did this beautiful study to answer this question specifically for cancer patients. And their conclusion in their paper was, yes, a whole food plant-based diet is the best diet to reduce the risk of cancer and to improve metabolic health for cancer survivors. Okay, so when I started with that study, with the dietary pattern for healthy aging, I said it was one of my top 3 favorite studies. Well, this one is one of my top 3 too. This is so cool. So this came from 2 prospective cohort studies. That means they asked individuals how much vegetable and fruit they're going to have, and they followed them moving forward. They also had 26 additional studies that they followed. So it was a big study with over 2 million person years, okay? What they found is individuals that had 2 or less servings of vegetables and fruits a day, or 5 servings of vegetables and fruits a day. Those with 5 servings of vegetables and fruits a day had a 10% lower risk of cancer, a 10% lower risk of dying from heart disease, and a 35% lower risk of dying from respiratory disease, which I think is really interesting. In fact, when I read this today, I scratched my head and I said, what does this mean? 35% lower risk of respiratory disease. It just didn't fit. Until I kind of thought about it more, right? And this is kind of flu season for everyone, so this is an important one. Let's think about COVID. We actually learned during COVID that people on a plant-based diet or a pescatarian diet had a 73% lower odds of moderate to severe COVID with a plant-based diet and a 59% lower risk of getting moderate to severe COVID with a pescatarian diet. And those individuals on a keto diet had a 3.5-fold increased risk of moderate to severe COVID. This is another cool study. This study was published last year. And what they found is that those individuals on a vegetarian or a plant-based diet had a 39% lower risk of COVID. Love that. So that sounds pretty easy, getting 5 or more servings of vegetables and fruits a day, right? It doesn't sound like much. And I bet most of you are doing it because you guys are really interested and that's why you're here. But guess what? 90% of Americans are not consuming 5 or more servings of vegetables and fruits a day. That's like 2 to 3 cups of vegetables and 1.5 to 2 cups of fruit. That would be about the serving of a fist. Okay, that's what we think about, like 5 fists of vegetable and fruits a day. So I put it to the test in my own cancer center. I thought, this just doesn't make sense. I'm certain that my patients at Mayo Clinic are doing better. Now, these aren't my personal patients. These are just patients at Mayo Clinic Breast Cancer Center. And guess what I found out? 95% of the women being seen in our breast clinic are not meeting the 5 or more. So I learned this is a much more common thing. So oftentimes women will say, well, what do I do then? What's a good breakfast for me? I have lots of patients that love smoothies. So if you're a smoothie person, I just want to share this resource from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. I'm going to share this QR code a few more times during my talk. So if you don't get it right in this slide, you can grab it on the next one. These are free resources for you. I love this. So I have women typically use soy milk as their base. I start from the bottom and I work up. 1 to 2 cups of a plant-based soy milk that's unsweetened. Check that ingredient list, make sure there's no fillers. Maybe we'll add a booster. Maybe we'll do a little turmeric, a little cinnamon. For the fat and fiber, I love 1 tablespoon of hemp seed. When it comes to the protein, personally, I love throwing chickpeas in there. It makes it real creamy, or some tofu. Some people may opt to use some protein powder, but just be careful. Look for the Clean Label Act because many protein powders have heavy metals in it nowadays. One real cool thing is hemp seeds. 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds have 10 grams of protein. I love berries, just like those purple sweet potatoes. Berries can be really rich in those anthocyanins. So I always tell women, let's get 1 cup of frozen berries thrown in that smoothie, and then green leafy vegetables. Take 2 big handfuls of green leafy vegetables, throw it in that smoothie. It's a great way to start your day, or you can have it as a snack sometime in the middle of your day. This is such a darling study. You know, I would say, like I said, with Rachel, the thing that bothered me most about her was the fact she was sad. And here we have a cool study saying, hey, if you eat more vegetables and fruits, it was associated with less worry, less tension, and less joylessness. These people felt happier across their lifespan. I think this is one of my favorite studies. It's not in my top 3 because my other ones are just so powerful. And this is a smaller study. That's why I didn't make it my top 3. But I think it's one of the cutest studies I've ever seen. So eat some vegetables and fruits, and we'll all be happy together. So here's my take-home message number 2. In the spirit of being joyful, fill half your plate with veggies and fruits every single meal, no exceptions. So when you eyeball that meal, whether it's a plate or a bowl, I always want you to hear my chirpy little voice and think, okay, Dr. Dawn said half of this needs to come from vegetable and fruit. I really want you to work on that, okay? Here you go. This is that QR code again. This goes to the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Food is Medicine Jumpstart. This is an awesome handbook you can use and download for free. But the main thing is take a look at the middle of the slide. This depicts it perfectly. Half that plate is coming from vegetable, or you can have some fruit in there too. I love that. That upper corner, maybe throw in some beans, that lower corner, some whole grains. But man, really work at getting half that plate coming from vegetable and fruit. So what is it in those vegetables and fruits that are so magical, right? Well, there's vitamins and there's minerals and these phytonutrients that are like phytochemicals that fight disease and help to power up the body. But guess what? The other part of magic in those vegetables and fruits is fiber. All right, I probably should say I have 4 favorite studies because I think I have 4 today, but this is the coolest study I've ever seen. 17 million individuals were in this study. It was called an umbrella review of 33 studies. And what they showed is there was class 1 evidence. That's the strongest evidence we have in medicine, that fiber had the ability to lower the risk of dying from heart disease by 28%, lower the risk of pancreas cancer, lowered the risk of diverticular disease. It also lowered the risk of dying from any cause in chronic diseases overall. There was another fiber study published last year that showed it reduced body weight, improved blood sugar control, lowered insulin, and helped cholesterol. And then, of course, being the cancer specialist, the third study showed a 22% lower risk of cancer being diagnosed and a 17% lower risk of dying from cancer. So fiber, fiber, fiber. Sounds easy, but guess what? The statistic is just as bad as the vegetable and fruit. 91% of women don't get enough. 95% of men don't get enough. The average American is getting about 17 grams a day. Gals, we want you to get about 30, 35 grams a day. Men, we want you to get 35 to 38 grams a day. So what we find is people doing a really good job on their whole food plant-based diet are getting about 40 grams a day. So let's just raise the bar and make 40 our goal. How does that sound? So this is how I have my patients do it. I spend a lot of time in the grocery store looking at these labels. My patients do too, and they learn to enjoy it. They really find joy in it. The first thing I want folks to do is look at that label and try to find a fiber source that has at least 3 grams of fiber. That's really good. If it has 5 grams of fiber, that's amazing. And you can see here that 3 gram, this is sprouted bread. I love sprouted bread. And then I think it's great if folks want to take some avocado and lemon juice, some garlic, put some microgreens and to boost the protein, sprinkle some hemp seeds on top. This is totally delicious. Okay, look at this. You're going to get 13.5 grams of fiber in this meal and 16 grams of protein. Who would guess, right? Plant-based. Awesome. And that sprouted bread is a complete protein. Here's another one of my favorite meals. Again, we're going to look at the fiber. We always want that fiber gram on any label to hit at least 3 grams. Let's always get to the minimum. Okay, 3 grams is the minimum on those labels. This has 4 grams of fiber. This is a sprouted oatmeal. And this is one of the other breakfasts I love for my patients because I can really boost the protein if it's someone I need to get more protein. So you do a half a cup of those sprouted oats, 1 tablespoon of flaxseed, do your 1 cup of soy milk, a cup of frozen berries, maybe sprinkle a few walnuts. Let's throw in those 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds to give you that 10 grams of protein. I love cinnamon. And I really like the Ceylon cinnamon because we believe there's a little less coumarin in it, which is a little bit of a heavy metal product that we don't want people to get. So I say Ceylon cinnamon. Do a teaspoon. It helps to regulate blood sugar. And if you want a little bit of a sweetness to this, go ahead and use some stevia leaf extract or monk fruit. Or if you would rather use something like maple syrup or honey, feel free to do that. Dairy gets a lot of question, right? This comes from the American Institute for Cancer Research. We know all cancers may have an increased risk with the consumption of too much cheese, butter, and whole milk. We know that prostate cancer and ovarian cancer do have links to increased cancer risk with overconsumption of dairy products. When we look at colorectal cancer and breast cancer, it gets a little bit more mixed though. It's a very, very interesting finding. And we know that it's likely not the dairy itself that's giving the protection. It's probably just the calcium. And you know you can get the calcium from your plant products. Excuse me. So let's go back to that study that was right in the very beginning of our talk. We talked about the optimal dietary pattern for healthy aging. And it did talk that low-fat dairy in moderation, like a vegetarian diet, can be part of a healthy dietary pattern. So I think here with my patients, a lot of them enjoy occasionally some low-fat yogurt, okay? Or maybe some goat kefir. I myself personally do a whole food plant-based diet. I opt not to do dairy, and I don't need to. So you may opt to be more like me, or you may want a little more flexibility in your diet. And we have research to show that it's reasonable if you want to have a serving of dairy a day. The definition of low fat, moderate consumption will be like one yogurt a day. Here's another fun fact from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine showing us that sure, you can certainly get calcium in your food. Your green leafy vegetables, soybeans, and even some of the plant milks are fortified with calcium if you're okay with fortified food. But I have a really fun slide for you next. Here you go. Take a screenshot of this one, okay? This gives you all those milligrams of calcium. You can add it up yourself. So this is what I invite my patients to do. And I really want my patients to be really involved in their health. The goal calcium for a menopausal woman or for a man over the age of 71, men over the age of 50, your goal is going to be about 1,000 milligrams of calcium. So let's just say that our goal for uses of this calculation is 1,200 milligrams a day of calcium. I really want folks to get that from food, but sometimes it's hard to get it from food alone. So if someone is getting about 700 milligrams from their food, they're about 500 milligrams shy of that 1,200 milligram goal if this is a postmenopausal woman like Rachel. So I would have her add a 500 milligram calcium citrate supplement. If you're only taking 500 milligrams, you can do it in one dose. If you need to take more, you need to split it up. Your body typically only absorbs 500 milligrams. I take time for this slide because all too often I hear doctors telling patients, take 1,200 milligrams of calcium. And the truth is we would rather you get it from nutrition if your nutrition naturally fits that. If it doesn't, then you take the remaining amount you need as a supplement. I have my patients once a month write everything they eat, write the milligrams of calcium, add it up, and do this calculation. Chat GPT, which is an AI, can help you with this too, and even help you with the calculation. So what about red and processed meat? Well, processed meat is a group 1 carcinogen. That's right, it's linked to cancer in the same category as cigarettes and arsenic. Not good. We have no room for processed meat in a healthy diet. It's linked to 34,000 cancer deaths each year worldwide because of diets high in processed meat. And red meat, well, it's a probable group 2 carcinogen, likely also linked to cancer. And these are some of the reasons why. One of the key reasons is when we heat up that meat, it creates these compounds from the meat muscle itself, that creatinine. It causes these heterocyclic amines and these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and that's what's strongly linked to that colon cancer. There's this other compound called Nu5GC, and it's really inflammatory. And we know it creates this immune response and inflammation, and we think that's also linked to cancer and other inflammatory like autoimmune diseases. Heme iron is very oxidative. When we think we take antioxidants, okay, we want to take more fruits and vegetables, and a lot of people take antioxidants as a supplement. They're taking an antioxidant to get rid of oxidation. But we know heme iron in the red meat drives oxidation. It's actually making it worse. So it doesn't make sense to be taking antioxidants only to be driving the process and working against it. Here's a few other things that have been reported as contributing mechanisms for disease pathways related to red meat: the insulin growth factor and cancer promotion. Though that theory is currently being rethought at this time. There was a recent publication that's making us scratch our heads on this a little bit to further understand insulin growth factor from meat and the consistent link with cancer formation. It seems we may need to go back to the science a little bit more to understand this one. So I want to be very fair to that speaking point. Beyond that, we know that there's oxidized molecules. We know that there's this TMAO in some people in their actual gut, that when they eat meat, there is an element in the meat called carnitine, also things like choline. And when we eat the meat, the gut microbiome in people that have this molecule called TMAO is what causes the cardiovascular plaque in our arteries. So that's how there's this link with red meat consumption and heart disease. There's this also concern that, okay, what are the animals eating? Are the animals eating like GMO or genetically modified foods? Are the animals eating foods with pesticides and herbicides? Do the animals have exposure to heavy metals? And when we eat the animals, is that accumulating in our body at a more increased risk? That research is underway. It's not entirely clear yet. We also know from this study that was published in 2023, massive study with over 200,000 participants in over 5 million person years. And they showed that an increased consumption of red meat and processed meat was linked to a 62% increased risk of diabetes. And when you swapped out that total red meat consumption, you lowered the risk of diabetes by 30%. So what they said is take one serving a day of red meat and swap it out for beans or nuts or even dairy. And in doing that, you slash the risk of diabetes. And that's not that hard. So let's really try to do that. So we're going to get rid of ultra processed foods. We're going to eat more vegetables and fruits, making half that plate vegetable and fruit. And if we're eating red meat every single day or more than that, we're going to try to swap out that serving of red meat once a day for a bean or a nut or a serving of low-fat dairy, okay? What about fish? Well, it was once thought fish could be a part of a healthy diet, but unfortunately, the waterways have become quite contaminated. So if you are consuming fish, we want you to do that cautiously. I love the Environmental Working Group Seafood Calculator. This QR code will take you to it. On this calculator, you enter in your weight, your age, your gender, and if you have heart disease. And it will tell you how much fish you consume that would be safe. For women, generally it's 1 to 3 servings a week of 1 to 3 ounces, very small amounts. The next slide just shows you that in the upper right-hand corner would be the safer forms of fish, the ones lower in mercury and higher in omega-3 fatty acids. There's an acronym called SMASH. S for salmon, M for mackerel, A for anchovy, S for sardine, and H for herring, okay? However, I think most of you on this call are like me. You're kind of working towards being more whole food plant-based. We know the average American has a significant amount of omega-3 deficiencies. The goal of omega-3 in the blood is over 8%, but about 40% of Americans are less than 4%. And even more concerningly is about 66% of vegans or people on a whole food plant-based diet have an omega-3 deficiency that's less than 4 also. So I want you really to pay attention to this slide. This is why I always want my patients to try to get 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed a day, or a tablespoon of chia seeds, or 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds. If they're not doing one of those things, you don't need to do all 3 of it. If you're not doing one of those things, then try to get 7 walnuts a day. So try to get that alpha linolenic acid to support your body's need, okay? Next would be in terms of EPA and DHA. We want you to get both the alpha linolenic acid, but also the EPA and DHA. We now know in a recent study of vegans showing that there is this concern for deficiency. So if you are not consuming fish, I do want to invite any patient that I follow, please ask your doctor, but I do want my patients to rely on an algae supplement, 200 to 500 milligrams of a combined EPA and DHA. It is not reliable enough to rely on seaweed that would be like from kelp or spirulina or chlorella to get that consistent omega-3 with DHA. So I really want you to be cautious with this because it pertains to your brain health. Okay. Another one of my really favorite studies, this came from the NIH AARP study, so the National Institutes for Health, over 6 million person years. And again, it's just driving home this awesome message that, man, when we flip out plant protein, we're contributing to healthy aging. So neat. And so this study helps me to answer the question that some of you may have about eggs. And what it showed us is that, yes, when you replace plant protein for egg protein, you reduce dying from any cause if you're a man by 24% and 21% if you're a woman. So let's think about it. If you have scrambled eggs every single day, let's take half of those days and maybe do a tofu scramble. Okay? So we want to work on that. And you can see here these other swaps, right? Trying to substitute plant protein for red meat protein, reduce the risk of dying from any cause by 13% in men, 15% in women. We saw that earlier study, that remarkable reduction in diabetes. So it's really fun to see these studies. This is a really cool study, ladies. This one's really had a large proportion of women in this study. 50,000 individuals in the nurses' health study. It was a little over 48,000. So we're going to just round up and say 50,000. Okay. They followed them for 30 years. The question they asked in this study was, what is the path to healthy aging for physical health, cognitive health, and emotional health? And what they found out is that the women who ate more plant protein had a 38% more likely healthy aging into their later years, physically, cognitively, and emotionally. Powerful study to show us that, listen, if you don't want to eat your red meat, if you don't want to eat chicken, if you don't want to eat fish, and if you don't want to eat dairy or eggs, you can absolutely age in a very healthy way. And this is how you do it. Another slide from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, just giving you some of these swaps and what those grams of protein look like. But I know that you have this burning question, right? Like everyone kind of fights us on this. Can you get enough protein from plants? And is it enough? Is it effective? The answer is yes. From some of the leading exercise physiologists and scientists on muscle building, and these are carnivore people, they have now concluded that yes, plant protein can be just as effective as animal protein if a variety of plant foods are eaten. There's 9 essential amino acids, and they must come from food. In the olden days, when I was a little girl and a vegan, we were told when I was young, Dawn, you need to eat your bread with your peanut butter. Dawn, you need to do your rice with your beans. And my parents would kind of drive this home to me. We now know that that's not necessary. You don't need to do it all in the same meal. Think of your body like a bank. It's going to deposit the amino acids it needs to build muscle when it needs it, and it's going to withdraw the ones it needs to go ahead and start making that building process take place. Those amino acids are the building blocks for protein. There's 20 total, but 9 of them we must get from food. Okay? What's really cool though is complete proteins is when you check the box on all 20 of those amino acids. And there's some plant proteins, just like animal proteins, that check that box. Soybeans, things like tofu, tempeh, soy milk, edamame, the mycoproteins, which I'm super excited about, more to come. When you go to your grocery store, you may see some of these novel food replacements. You read the ingredient list and it says mycoprotein. I wish I could see a raise of hands right now, but mycoprotein is mushroom. It's so cool, so healthy for you. It's rich in fiber as well as protein. So definitely give those a shot. Super excited about the power of mycoprotein. Quinoa is a beautiful, it's not a grain, but it's like a grain, and it's a complete protein. Amaranth, nutritional yeast is an awesome way you can add nutritional yeast to your soup, to any of your pastas, to your salads. It's an awesome way to make your food savory with a boost of protein. And boy, I know I've already driven home the whole message on hemp seeds. So how much do you need? Take a look at that box to the right. So on research to date, what the findings are showing us now is it really does matter whether you're under 65 or over 65, how much protein you get. We've always known that over the age of 65, there's this thing called anabolic resistance, meaning it's harder to absorb those amino acids and build muscle. So because of that, you needed more. if you're over the age of 65. But we now know even individuals under the age of 65, you need a little bit more than we originally thought. So I push my patients towards a higher goal with the emphasis on plant sources, preferably. This is where I want you. I never want someone to be low. I don't want to be wrong. And if I know you're getting it from plant sources, I'm really excited about that. So my recommendation is 1.2 grams to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, regardless of age. Now, if you're on a GLP-1 weight loss medication, your doctor may actually have you go higher. They may have you go up to 2.0. Now, to hit this goal, it doesn't mean you need to do a chicken breast to reach it, or a piece of steak, or 5 extra eggs. It means we really want to try to hit these goals with plant protein if possible. Now, in the brown print there, that's your calculation for grams per pound. And this is ideal body weight. The IBW is ideal body weight. Feel free to take a picture of the slide because you can do this calculation yourself, okay? And on this next slide, I have your ideal body weight calculated out for you, all right? So again, I'm gonna go back to the slide one more time to allow you to take a picture of that slide. Your aim is gonna be 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, or 0.54 to 0.70 grams per pound of ideal body weight. And here are your ideal body weight calculations. So you would look at your height to the left in inches and feet or centimeters, follow it over to the right. If you're a man, grab your kilogram. If you're a woman, grab your kilogram, and then you'll calculate it out with the numbers I just shared for you, okay? All right. So next, this is common plant-based protein sources. Take a picture of this. This is so fun. I love this slide. So these are all the ways you can get protein from plant foods. So this is just a nice resource for you. But man, where do you start? And how do you figure out what meals to get? Well, if any of you have used ChatGPT, I use it all the time in my patients. And then this was an example of what I did for Rachel. Please provide a simple, delicious, one-day meal plan with protein count that's 80 to 90 grams. That's what Rachel's goal was. And this is what it gave me. And I included some smart swaps and tips that you can even consider right here in this. All right, so feel free to take a picture of this. I won't read through it, but you can see it's pretty easy to grab a 90-gram protein meal without even trying too hard. Very, very easy. Beans are such a great way to get that protein, and they also have awesome fiber. So I really want my patients to get beans, at least 1 to 3 servings every single day. And when I think of beans, I think of lentils, I think of split peas, okay? As well as soybeans. When you're new to this diet, you want to start slow as you add fiber. Some people give the history of, oh gosh, beans are really hard for me. That's because your gut microbiome is just not ready for it yet. The other thing is there's a carbohydrate in beans called raffinose, and that's a carbohydrate that makes us real gassy. So you want to make sure you soak your dried beans at least overnight and then rinse them really good. And you may even want to pressure cook them if you're one of those people who's really sensitive. But rinsing those beans after you've soaked them to get all that raffinose off is critical. Now, if you're doing canned beans like me, because I tend to be in a hurry, you want to make sure you rinse those really good too and still cook them. But start slow. I find when women do give me the history that beans are hard for them to digest, when I have them start with lentils and split peas, they do best. And oftentimes I'll have them start with just 2 to 3 tablespoons. Very slow. Work your way up and add a little more every 5 days. We're in no hurry. You have the rest of your lifetime to explore this. One of my favorite recipes, one of my favorite little quick, fast, high protein chefs, he's on YouTube and Instagram, Epic Mint Leaves. This is a powerful treat, and this is one that a lot of my patients' kids love. Sometimes at dinner time, I will make these. I'll put in a huge bed of mixed greens. Boom, that could be dinner for the night, because guess what? 33 grams of protein in a serving of this. Really yummy, crunchy snack. So grab that QR code or just head over to Epic Mint Leaves. Follow him for more fun, high protein, plant-based snacks. This is another cool one. I love sprouts. You could sprout your beans. This is a nice QR code that'll take you to a great podcast with Simon Hill, where he's interviewing a doctor, Dr. Fahey and Doug Evans, who talk about the power of sprouting. And this is a fun soup that even has lentil sprouts in it. So just another fun recipe for you. And I wanted to spend a moment to talk about soy because soy is the biggest myth we have in plant-based nutrition. Soy does not cause cancer. That research was done in rodents, and we are not rodents, we are human beings that have notoriously in every study shown benefit with soy. For breast cancer, we know soy prevents the risk of dying from breast cancer, particularly when women have soy at a young age. Soy binds to estrogen receptor beta receptor, and that's the receptor that turns off proliferation in the breast, or can be considered as a tumor suppressor. Very favorable. In fact, the American Cancer Society, the American Institute for Cancer Research, both write frequently. You can see the bottom QR code from the American Institute for Cancer Research that soy is safe and studies promote that it's beneficial. The American Cancer Society's update on nutrition and physical exercise after a cancer diagnosis in 2022 dedicated 3 paragraphs to soy and breast cancer. And there was a review of the data that actually showed that soy after breast cancer diagnosis may have the potential to lower the risk of breast cancer coming back, called breast cancer recurrence, by 25% in the women that consumed more versus those that avoided it. So I encourage my breast cancer patients to get 1 to 3 servings of soy a day. Men, it may reduce the risk of prostate cancer. There are some studies that suggest maybe even helps reduce the risk of lung cancer in non-smokers. And soy is amazing for the gut microbiome. More exciting tips on soy. There was this cool study by Dr. Neil Barnard. This was a small study, but man, in my clinical practice, I see this over and over and over again. The benefit of soy on hot flashes. And what it showed is that a half a cup of edamame with a plant-based diet reduced moderate to severe hot flashes by 88%. The women lost on average 8 pounds over 12 weeks. Their moods were better and they had improved libido. Super cool study. Another great resource on how to cook tofu is right here from T. Colin Campbell, Center for Nutrition Studies. This is a free resource, so do use it. I use it all the time for my patients. Some great tofu recipes, tofu dressings, and also how on earth do you cook the stuff? This is one of the recipes they have, and this is a favorite one that I always use at the holidays. So maybe next year you can use it at the holidays. But this is a fun one. You can put some pomegranate seeds on it. Those are those yummy Mary crackers. And this is one of the recipes when we do breast cancer retreats at Mayo Clinic that we prepare for the folks attending those retreats. Another way I onboard my patients is with the use of Be a Plant-Based Woman Warrior cookbook in grain bowls. I love this idea of grain bowls. It gives you a lot of food variety and it's a lot of fun. You can follow them on YouTube. I really just want to share some of the resources that have helped my patients, and myself include, be onboarded to fun plant-based nutrition where you never get sick of eating the same thing each day because it's colorful, vibrant, and like so truly tasty. And Carly Bodrug, she just had a baby recently. She has Plant You, and she has a sequel to this book. She's just a real dynamo with some amazing recipes. She has the gift of connecting, so check her out too. And my favorite chocolate chip cookie recipe is actually in this cookbook, made with tahini. We want to make sure you cut out sugar. We know that high total and added sugar is linked to a higher risk of breast cancer and a higher risk of bad outcomes after cancer. And we know it contributes to metabolic disease and many other unhealthy conditions. So what do you use to sweeten things up then? I am 100% green light with the use of stevia or monk fruit in my patients. This came out of Consumer Labs. This is a higher rated stevia and monk fruit products that do not have erythritol. So this would be a nice resource if you want a little sweetness without increasing blood sugar. And these are the sweeteners I recommend for my patients, in addition to allulose. Now, in my own personal cooking, I also use a lot of maple syrup and date paste, date syrup. Coffee is a common question I get, and we're finishing up here, but coffee is always linked to living longer on Earth. It's been linked to a lower cause of dying from any cause, lower risk of cardiovascular disease. Studies in a recent 2025 study with 170,000 people linked it to more coffee had less fatty liver disease, and less liver cancer. There's also benefits with the reduction in diabetes, seems to be protective for the brain, including Parkinson's, and a lower risk of other cancers, including uterine cancer, breast cancer, and some skin cancers. There's this polyphenol, or this like kind of phytonutrient in the coffee called chlorogenic acid. And what's so cool is if you put cow dairy in the coffee, you lower the body's ability to absorb that chlorogenic acid. So you want to use more of a plant milk if you like cream in your coffee. Try to remember not to put sugar. You want to avoid that. Use one of those sugar substitutes I just shared, the stevia, monk fruit, or even allulose. And what the studies typically show us is about 2 up to 4 cups a day, about 8 ounces. If you're sensitive to coffee, do the decaf. It appears the decaf gives you just as much benefit. And make sure you avoid that caffeine too late into the morning or early afternoon because it may keep you up at night. We don't want to do that. We know the gut microbiome is such a cornerstone of overall health, as I discussed earlier, for the immune system as well as the mood and beyond. The goal here is 30 or more different plant foods a week is going to give you the best gut microbiome, and throw in some fermented foods too. Over and over, talk after talk, I've had patients say, Dawn, can you give us a eat this, not that? So this is the dedication to every patient that's ever asked me that. But guess what? I think after today's talk, you probably have a pretty good idea on how to do this. You probably could have wrote this yourself, but feel free to take a screenshot. And I made a little mention earlier that, you know what? Eating healthy doesn't have to cost more. And we have research that shows us that when you shop smart, though eating smart, eating healthy is going to take you a little more time in the grocery store. Make that meaningful time because you're giving back to yourself. It doesn't have to cost more. And this JAMA Network Open study in 2023 showed us that it could save actually $500 a year, actually save money compared to more of a standard American or carnivore style diet. So let's go back to Rachel. After 24 months, she lost 60 pounds. Her body mass index became normal. Her diabetes totally reversed off her metformin and off her oral agents. She was using some apple cider vinegar with her meals, and she brushed her teeth real good after. Her cholesterol normalized, her triglycerides normalized, and she used this natural compound called Indian gooseberry or amla fruit. She would use that twice a day, about 500 milligrams, to also help her cholesterol. Her fatty liver disease normalized with normal liver functions. She has normal blood pressure. She's off her CPAP. But the most beautiful thing was, and this gives me chills, she reestablished joy. And she no longer needed her venlafaxine because she said, guess what? My hot flashes are better with the soy foods. And her sister's doing amazing as well. And it's really cool because among the breast cancer patients I see that apply these healthy living lifestyles, there's this awesome DELCAP study, and it shows us, yeah, gosh, healthy living after breast cancer really matters. And healthy living after breast cancer can actually lower the risk of dying from any cause after breast cancer by almost 60%. And we know from the American Institute for Cancer Research breast cancer prevention studies that in terms of taking good care of your body to prevent cancer, those numbers are right on par. 50 to 60% breast cancer reduction in any breast cancer occurring in women who live healthier lifestyles. It's never too late to start. In fact, if you're 78, 80 years old and you're listening to this talk and you're like, I don't know, it's probably not worth my time. Well, guess what? If you give it a shot, you're going to feel great. And you can add 3.4 years to your life if you're 80. But I really want us to rewind back. If you're 20 and you're listening to this, let's start now. Because if you're a woman, you can add nearly 11 years to your life expectancy, healthy years. And if you're a man, you can add 13 years. Again, that's getting more beans, more whole grains, more vegetables and fruits and nuts, and really getting rid of that red and processed meat. And of course, getting rid of the ultra processed food. So this is just in closing, daily choices add up to longer, better living. And what we eat really shapes our metabolic health, our mood, our love, our connections, and keeps us on earth longer. We really want to transition from a Western diet toward this optimal plant predominant diet. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's about progress, not perfection. So here's the key, right? Half that plate, every single meal is going to come from vegetable and fruit, right? Try to get a quarter of that plate coming from beans and aim for 30 to 40 grams of fiber each day. Really try to have your food diversified. Try to get those 30 different plant foods a week. I really want you to work at getting rid of those ultra processed foods and try to cook from scratch wherever possible. I personally love my patients to aim for 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight of protein a day. If you're a strict whole food plant-based, no animal protein person, you need some B12. So talk to your doctor about what dose is right for you. I generally have my women get about 500 micrograms a day of B12. And again, if you're not consuming any fish, please consider taking an algae supplement with DHA and EPA, about 500 milligrams. Coffee can be part of a healthy diet. You don't need to slash it, but if you're sensitive to caffeine, Do the decaf, never put in cow milk, only use plant milk, and be sure to hydrate smartly. Cut out that red meat and swap it for some beans. Try to eliminate that sugar and use some stevia or monk fruit, or just stick to whole fruit. And then remember, it's about eating healthy, but like what the blue zones do, they're still moving naturally. They have lots of meaning and purpose in their life. They don't eat to the point that they're just really full, only 80% full. Really embrace your social circles, have a sense of belonging, get out in the sunshine, and just remember in the end, love is medicine. So thank you all so much. I know I used a little bit more of your time than I had planned on it, so I'm really grateful for your time. And any questions, I'm on Instagram. You can shoot me a question there. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Mussallem. That was such an exciting and energy-filled presentation. You can go ahead and stop sharing your screen there. Yeah, thank you. You know what I really love is that everything was evidence-backed. That is so key these days, I think, with the abundant misinformation out there. And I also loved all of the recipes you shared and kind of those practical resources and tips, because I think in theory, most people think that sounds great, but implementing those changes in the daily life can be really difficult. Do you ever find when maybe you have a patient that you're working with that is maybe in that space of eating 60% ultra processed food and is a little bit intimidated or even feels that they won't enjoy those whole plant foods? How do you move the dial towards that plate you showed from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine?
Oh, Elena, thanks for your sweet words there. And you are right. Listen, this is no one's fault. So the food industry has totally hacked our brain. The food nowadays, this is such a great point, is designed to be hyper palatable. So they search for the perfect palate flavor, texture, feel when they make the food. And then they put EEGs to measure the brain activation, or they do MRIs on individuals, and they look for something called the bliss point. So your body eating ultra processed food is used to doing this dopamine hit. It's used to having this massive pleasure. So when you first put a strawberry in your mouth, when you're used to all this fake food like a strawberry Pop Tart, a regular strawberry is gonna be like, what is this? I don't really taste this. It's gonna take you a little bit of time. And so I want you to put that food in the mouth and kind of savor it, savor the feel, savor the temperature. And with time, your body's gonna adapt to it. And I find that my patients get so excited about the color of the food, the smell of the food, using the different spices. That's why I do share the stevia and monk fruit if you need a little bit of sweetness to start off. But bottom line, this is a step in the right direction. Give yourself a few weeks, continue to explore the foods, the feel, the texture, the taste, and you will become accustomed to it. This is not your fault. This is what the food industry did, because it's kind of hacked your brain and your poor little body forgot what that little strawberry once used to taste like. So give yourself time. For some people that feel overwhelmed, I just have them start with one meal. Let's just start with breakfast. If you're not eating breakfast, start eating breakfast. I have a lot of people that want to fast, but breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So if you're really committed to fasting, try to still get that breakfast by 10 or 11 a.m. and maybe try one of those few breakfast ideas that I shared with you, or one of the ideas that Corwell brings to you.
Great. My next question is regarding those that maybe already are living with a chronic illness or navigating a new challenging diagnosis, especially if they're feeling overwhelmed or that they're not going to be able to totally change their health trajectory through lifestyle alone. What guidance would you offer to help them feel more empowered and hopeful by what you've shared today, even if they can't totally go off all medications, for example, or totally change that health trajectory?
I really love that. That's so important, and I'm a 25-year stage 4 cancer survivor. And so when they gave me my diagnosis, I knew I needed chemo, right? I needed that. As a heart transplant survivor, I take a lot of medications. I need those to be alive, but I support my vitality with conventional care. And that's why I know myself as a patient, I feel so good. That's not always the case with a lot of heart transplant patients or cancer survivors. They are kind of stuck in that side effect profile of what their medications are doing. But the cool thing, like Rachel, was she did have those medications that we were able with time to slowly bring her off of. And she just had such satisfaction with that. But I have many women that aren't able to get off their blood pressure medications, or they weren't able to get off their cholesterol medication, and that's okay. Sometimes there is that 20 to 25% family link that you still need those medicines, and that's all right. We don't beat ourselves up, we accept that. I really believe in the art of acceptance, and we really want to still move towards eating healthier, because even taking those various medications, you eating healthier is going to lower the inflammation and the overall harmony of your body, not just physiologically from a disease risk standpoint, but from a vitality standpoint. You're going to have more energy and more healthy aging years on earth. And it's that health span, not lifespan, that we really want to lengthen. You know, right now there's this gap that we only have, say, 60 healthy years on earth, and then we have 12 to 16 unhealthy years on earth. We don't want those 12 to 16 unhealthy years on earth. We want every year on earth to be healthy, and eating healthy is your way to do that. I hope that answers the question. It's just there's definitely a place for us to honor and respect the need for conventional medicine. That's supported with healthy eating, moving your body. The power of 9 from Blue Zones is how we can recultivate harmony and love and joy in life.
I love that response, and I appreciate that too. My husband is a 24-year organ transplant recipient, so his kidney turned 24 this year, and he is a testament to exactly what you just said, that even though you can't maybe get off all of those medications or totally change, you can still have vitality in the midst of that. And, you know, his doctors are always impressed by how long his kidney has lasted. So I really appreciate that, as it's personal to me. All right, one last question. I know our focus was food today, but I also know that you are personally very active and promote exercise, even exercising through cancer treatments. For someone who's aging and maybe has been sedentary most of their lives, how do you encourage them to maybe adopt a new exercise routine later in life, if they have not before?
Oh, that's so important. And, you know, exercise is medicine. And you know, it's hard to say. So many times I get the question, what matters most? When it comes to breast cancer, actually, exercise is the most powerful lifestyle thing you can do. It actually improves breast cancer outcomes by 40 to 50%. So it's a massive number. So I get hardcore with my patients. I make them move. I say, if you're tired, you got to move and you're going to be less tired. So what I say is, all right, we're just exhausted, right? We want to just still make yourself take that 5 to 10 minute walk. And by the way, you don't have to run, you can walk. You don't need to go to the gym. And if you really don't feel like walking, well, you can dance with your husband, or you can go do some gardening. You just walk around your house. Go, if it's the weather, because it's snowing or cold in your environment, go to your local Walmart or your local Lowe's or Home Depot. That's where I have all my patients go in the wintertime. And you can walk around the perimeter of the store. You can even go in the garden center and then walk back. You can take your dogs there and whatnot. But I need people to move. And so I always say start slow, 5 to 10 minutes. And ideally, maybe we just get that in after each meal, but try to get a 20 to 30-minute walk in as your exercise capacity builds. Another thing you do is even just after meals, you can just sit in that chair and just raise your calves. That even sometimes even helps to optimize metabolic health. You can do stretches, but movement is important. And we also want to focus on bone health as we age and muscle health. And so there's this huge protein push, right? And of course, I am recommending more protein than maybe some of the other folks on the talks that are being given here. But that's been in my research, and I do feel strongly with that. But guess what? All the protein in the world isn't going to build muscle if you don't give your muscles a reason to be strong. So I want my patients to get 150 to 300 minutes a week of walking, moving, cycling, rowing, whatever it is you enjoy, and 2 to 3 days a week of time to lift weights. Got to do that. Okay. Check out your local YMCA. If you are a cancer survivor, the YMCA does have the Live Strong program, which is free supervised exercise. If you are elderly and you are new to exercise, talk to your primary care physician about setting you up with a physical therapist that can give you exercise prescription. We really want to empower patients to get the exercise in. That strength is important for bones, for muscles, as well as fall risk reduction. Okay, great question.
Well, thank you so much for your thoughtful responses and sharing with us today. I feel like that was such a comprehensive presentation. You covered so much. And, I know that I feel energized just from your energy. So we just appreciate you being here and thank you for all the tips you shared. To everyone who's listening, thank you for joining us today. We're so happy to have you in the Plant Powered Challenge. Don't forget, family and friends are still welcome to join in. And if they do decide to join, they can still get all of the resources that have been shared so far, and those will be emailed to them. And remember, we record all of our sessions. They're shared in those Monday emails, so you can always rewatch. I know I'm going to be rewatching this webinar and screenshotting a lot of those recipes and tips. So be sure to try this week's delicious plant-powered recipes that we've shared. Great way to stay inspired and nourished. And let's keep the momentum going. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Mussallem.
Thank you all. Good luck. And Elena, I loved hearing the story about your husband. That's really empowering. So
Thank you.
bye all. Good luck.
Bye.